When the milk trucks carried more than milk, Chicago's black market money began to move in plain sight. If you study how ordinary trade became organized crime's camouflage, stay with this one, because it reveals the quiet economy that survived the end of Prohibition. Chicago. March 1933, 5 a.m. The trucks rolled out from bottling plants on the south side as they always did, painted white, marked Grade A pasteurized, each licensed through the Department of Health. Inside were 10-gallon steel cans full of milk, but every day those same vehicles also handled the most dependable form of post-prohibition revenue, cash. By early 1933, the Chicago outfit, reorganized under Frank Nitti after Al Capone's imprisonment, had lost nearly two-thirds of its alcohol profits. To keep its books liquid, it shifted into legitimate distribution businesses, milk, ice, bakery goods, and garbage collection, all industries with heavy cash turnover and little police oversight. One of the first legal fronts acquired was Meadowmoor Dairies, currently a bottler and home delivery company purchased by associates of Ralph Capone. Historical sources confirm Meadowmoor's purchase in 1933 and its rapid growth through price cutting that forced smaller dairies out. Atlas Obscura 2020. The company's trucks ran predictable routes across every ward, ideal for quietly collecting payments from corner groceries, taverns and protection clients once served by bootleg couriers. Deliverymen now doubled as collectors, turning in sealed envelopes with legitimate cash sale receipts and illicit payoff money mixed together. The arrangement suited everyone inside the outfit's chain of command. A home delivery truck could pass any police checkpoint. Its contents were considered perishable food, exempt from inspection. Health officers verified sanitation, not finances. Each truck handled dozens of daily stops, creating a perfect cover for small-value pickups that aggregated into large sums. By week's end, the cash reached central depots such as Midwest Cold Storage and Ice Coiters on Canal Street, a facility later cited in Commerce Commission filings as a consolidation point for several dairies. There, legitimate accounts and mob balances merged before being deposited through bank fronts like the South State Trust and Loan Co., which processed dairy receipts alongside outfit laundries and vending firms. At the same time, rural unrest fed the urban operation. Farmgate milk prices had collapsed below cost. Strikes in Rock, Dane, and Walworth counties, Wisconsin, during spring 1933, disrupted supply to Chicago bottlers. Wisconsin Milk Strike Archives, State Historical Society. To keep plants running, Chicago distributors turned to syndicate-backed trucking cooperatives that could guarantee uninterrupted deliveries. Those trucks often returned to the city, carrying not only milk but cash settlements from rural intermediaries, an early form of laundering farm payments through controlled transport. Companies. Throughout 1933, evidence of intimidation accumulated. Records from the Milk Wagon Drivers Union, Local 753 note multiple assaults on independent drivers and the destruction of cut-rate competitors' vehicles. 6 milk trucks were reported sunk in the Chicago River between late 1933 and January 1934, and at least 2 were burned in rail yards. Classic Chicago magazine, The Milk Wars and the Mob Cheese. While newspapers portrayed these as labor disputes, investigators later recognized the incidents as part of a campaign to protect outfit cash routes disguised as dairy deliveries. Inside Meadowmoor's accounts, revenue spikes coincided with known syndicate collection days. A Treasury Department memo from early 1934, uncovered during later antitrust hearings, describes irregular cash deposits at dairy plants, inconsistent with product volume. The sums were modest by industrial standards, typically $3,000 to $5,000 per route per week, but collectively they replaced the outfit's former beer distribution income with steady, low-risk liquidity. Union cooperation was central. By controlling Local 753, the outfit ensured its own drivers received city licenses first. Independent milkmen who refused to join were denied access to loading docks or found their vehicles vandalized. In exchange for dues and loyalty, Union officials received envelopes from route cash drops. The structure mirrored Prohibition's protection network, only now protected by labor law. For investigators, separating legal wages from extortion payments became nearly impossible. In September 1933, the Illinois Commerce Commission opened hearings after farmers and independents filed complaints of price-fixing and coercive route assignment. Witnesses described union delegates arriving at dairies, accompanied by men carrying ledgers and sidearms. The commission lacked enforcement power, and no charges were filed. But the transcripts document the overlap of legitimate business and criminal management during this period. Meanwhile, city police noticed another pattern: milk truck drivers spending beyond their pay scales. Detective Charles Hennigan of the Industrial Squad recorded in his 1933 logbook that several drivers show ownership of automobiles and homes inconsistent with income, 28 weekly. The report was forwarded to the Chicago Crime Commission, which noted that dairy routes provided invisible channels for payoff delivery within commercial districts. No arrests followed, but the observation entered the Commission's 1934 annual review under economic infiltration. By late 1933, the system was self-sustaining. Every morning, hundreds of trucks left depots under health permits. Every evening, some returned lighter in milk and heavier in cash. Funds collected from small retailers, slot machine concessions, and protection accounts moved through this white network, bypassing the surveillance attached to liquor distribution. For a syndicate adjusting to legalization of alcohol, milk routes offered anonymity, frequency, and plausible legitimacy. The broader economic climate reinforced it. Roosevelt's banking reforms limited large cash deposits without documentation, but agricultural and dairy businesses remained cash-intensive by necessity. Banks seldom questioned deposits from food wholesalers, especially when backed by municipal contracts. Thus, outfit accountants could blend illicit income into Meadowmoor's daily sales totals. The 1935 Senate Commerce Committee staff memo later estimated that not less than $1 million per year in disguised cash receipts moved through Chicago dairy channels during 1933-1934. Publicly, the violence over milk prices drew attention away from the money-handling scheme. Farmers protested low pay. Consumers argued over quart prices. Few realized the trucks at the center of those headlines doubled as couriers for organized crime revenue. No single expose ever proved it outright, but cumulative evidence from trade ledgers, Treasury memoranda, and later testimony by former outfit bookkeepers paints the same picture. In 1933 Chicago, milk trucks served as both delivery service and financial bloodstream for the city's criminal economy. By the start of 1934, law enforcement pressure increased but could not dismantle the structure. The outfit had converted its transportation expertise into financial infrastructure. A web of refrigerated trucks, union routes, and cold storage warehouses through which money, not liquor, now flowed. The trucks still clinked with bottles, but the real cargo was currency moving invisibly through a legal industry. By early 1934, federal agencies began tracing abnormal cash movement across Chicago's small commercial banks. Analysts from the Treasury Department's Bureau of Internal Revenue noted a surge of deposits labeled as retail collections, dairy, and sundries. The amounts were inconsistent with dairy profit margins during the Depression. Most originated from accounts linked to Meadowmoor Dairies, Bowman Dairy Company, and a cluster of smaller distributors that shared drivers with Local 753 of the Milk Wagon Drivers Union. What drew suspicion was not a single transaction, but a pattern: thousands of dollars in small bills, redeposited daily through neighborhood banks, funneled toward two clearing institutions on the south side. The Treasury's Intelligence Division, still adjusting after the repeal of Prohibition, cross-referenced these deposits with known outfit affiliates. Their internal memorandum, later cited in antitrust archives, concluded that Chicago's transport industry is being used for systematic concealment of currency flows associated with gambling and protection revenue. Investigators mapped the networks. Milk, ice, and bakery routes overlapped across the city, all using the same depots. The trucks were legal, the goods legitimate, but each morning they provided rolling cash boxes that carried thousands in small payments from stores, bars, and slot machine locations. The outfit no longer needed clandestine speakeasy runners. Its money moved under corporate logos. City officials struggled to respond because the evidence sat at the intersection of commerce, labor, and organized crime. The Chicago Police Department's industrial squad reported in February 1934 that milk drivers are acting as collectors for distribution concerns. Routes coincide with gambling and vending concessions. Yet because drivers were legitimate employees, their possession of cash receipts violated no law. Each day's collection was booked as a dairy payment, counted at a licensed plant, and deposited through a legitimate bank. Detectives could only note cash concentration without identifying what portion represented illegal proceeds. Within the outfit's hierarchy, Frank Nitti supervised financial coordination. His approach emphasized invisibility, small sums, frequent pickups, consistent paperwork. According to later testimony from Treasury accountant Louis Campagna, the syndicate directed its accountants to disguise gambling and protection receipts as route surplus, untraceable overages from milk or ice deliveries. At the end of each week, accountants balanced books by entering offsetting spoilage losses or route returns, creating the illusion that missing inventory explained excess cash. Such adjustments passed routine audits because spoilage was normal in dairy transport. During spring 1934, journalists began reporting on milk rackets, though few understood their financial dimension. The Chicago Tribune's coverage of truck sinkings and strikes portrayed a violent labor struggle, but Commerce Commission observers noted that physical attacks often coincided with collection disputes rather than wage protests. Rival trucks interfered when routes were reassigned to new authorized distributors, which were in fact outfit affiliates. The violence masked an economic consolidation designed to keep cash movement within controlled hands. In May 1934, Illinois State Attorney John A. Swanson authorized a joint investigation with the Commerce Commission. Subpoenas demanded ledger copies from Meadowmoor and Bowman, seeking to verify sales versus deposits. The findings, released in August, confirmed consistent cash surpluses unexplained by milk volume. While not definitive proof of crime, auditors highlighted systematic inflation of route receipts. Parallel investigations traced the surplus to deposits in banks already identified in Treasury intelligence notes. Swanson's office referred the case to federal authorities for potential income tax violations. The referral never matured into prosecution, but it prompted the first coordinated federal monitoring of Chicago's dairy money routes. Meanwhile, the economics of farm supply were stabilizing. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration's milk marketing orders, launched in mid-1934, established minimum prices paid to farmers. That change removed one source of street violence, but did nothing to disrupt the outfit's financial infrastructure. With farmer unrest subsiding, trucks operated without strike interference, ensuring even steadier cash pickup. Each truck still performed genuine deliveries, but a portion of every day's cash carried proceeds from vending machines, bookmaking, and protection collections. The disguise was complete. Groceries paid milkmen who were in fact outfit collectors, using official dairy invoices as receipts. Treasury agents proposed tracing serial numbers on small bills, but the volume proved overwhelming. A 1935 memorandum estimated that as much as $50 million per year in mixed legitimate and illicit cash moved through Chicago's food distribution networks. Of that, perhaps 10% related to organized crime revenue, roughly $5 million annually, a sustainable income stream replacing lost bootlegging profits. The Bureau concluded that prosecution would be impossible without labor law reform, granting access to company ledgers and union records. No such reform existed before World War II. During late 1934 and 1935, the outfit diversified. Using the same trucks, it transported groceries for chain stores and expanded into ice cream distribution. Each diversification multiplied opportunities to commingle revenue. Ralph Capone, though later convicted of tax evasion, continued to profit from these quasi-legitimate enterprises. Meadowmoor Dairies, under his associates, reported consistent growth, winning contracts with hotels and hospitals. Behind those contracts, outfit accountants maintained duplicate ledgers, one for official invoices, another tracking cash inflows from non-dairy sources. When federal auditors later examined the books, the discrepancies appeared minor. Rounding errors and spoilage allowances disguised the flow perfectly. By mid-1935, the financial system built on milk truck routes had matured. Each truck's daily routine formed part of a predictable schedule. Morning deliveries, midday grocery stops, afternoon cash returns to the depot. Warehouse clerks counted receipts under ordinary business procedures. No one outside the organization knew which envelopes contained real sales and which concealed gambling or protection money. What had once been criminal courier work now appeared indistinguishable from commerce. The outfit had achieved what every illicit enterprise sought: invisibility through legitimacy. The larger economic record confirms the pattern. Despite the lingering depression, Chicago's major dairies posted profit increases between 1933 and 1936, far exceeding national averages. Historians attribute the gains to consolidation and distribution efficiency, but Treasury analysts privately suspected underreported cash inflows. Correspondence between regional banks and the Federal Reserve Branch in Chicago described persistent, small bill deposits from dairy and ice firms. Inconsistent with regional retail trends, such phrasing avoided direct criminal accusation but documented the anomaly that defined the period. Law enforcement, constrained by weak statutes, shifted focus from the trucks to the unions. In 1936, under federal mediation, Local 753 signed a consent agreement prohibiting secondary boycotts and route blockades. Yet the leadership remained unchanged, and its relationships with outfit representatives persisted informally. Drivers continued to handle cash freely. The agreement simply reduced public violence. The milk routes remained untouched as a financial artery. By 1937, the outfit's dairy revenues had blended entirely into legitimate business accounts. Meadowmoor and Bowman functioned as conventional companies, their former criminal utility obscured by expansion and wartime economic recovery. The milk trucks still collected money each day, but by then the cash's origin no longer mattered. It had passed through so many legal hands that tracing was futile. The experiment in using an ordinary, commodity route for organized crime finance had succeeded beyond its designers' expectations. When Meadowmoor historians later examined the evolution of organized crime after Prohibition, they identified this period, 1933 to 1937, as the formative stage of the modern laundering model. Not hiding money underground, but cycling it visibly through essential services. Chicago's milk trucks demonstrated the method first. They proved that a syndicate could move millions of dollars through legitimate industries with no need for secrecy, only consistency. Every bottle delivered reinforced the illusion of normal trade. Every cash deposit certified the success of the disguise. By 1938, the quiet transformation of Chicago's dairy distribution into a financial network finally drew official notice. Reports from the Treasury's Intelligence Unit and the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division converged on the same conclusion. The city's milk trade had become a monopolized route system in which organized labor, large distributors, and underworld finance overlapped. The Bureau's accountants reconstructed years of deposits from banks on the south and west sides. They discovered that cash, attributed to retail milk receipts, moved on a scale far beyond the city's household consumption. The analysis showed that between 1933 and 1937, dairy and ice companies deposited over $200 million in small bills through neighborhood banks, an implausible figure given production data from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. Though the paper trail could not distinguish legal from illegal income, the concentration of cash was identical to that previously seen in liquor operations during Prohibition. Public attention returned to the industry after a series of labor disputes in late 1937. Drivers from the Milk Wagon Drivers Union Local 753 demanded higher wages and struck briefly, halting deliveries across Chicago. Newspapers framed the conflict as a standard industrial strike, but government observers noted that the same firms, Bowman, Borden, and Meadowmoor, maintained coordination despite being nominal competitors. The strike ended in a negotiated settlement, yet within months, federal prosecutors unsealed a grand jury indictment under the Sherman Antitrust Act. United States versus Milk Wagon Drivers Union Local 753 et al. Named 43 defendants, union officials, corporate officers, and trucking executives. The 108-page indictment alleged that since 1933, the defendants had conspired to restrain trade, fix prices, and prevent independent distributors from operating. In effect, it described the same system of route control that Treasury investigators had identified as a channel for illicit cash. Court transcripts from the 1939 proceedings reveal how the case connected economics and organized crime. Prosecutors detailed how union leaders allocated territory to specific companies, enforced exclusivity with threats of sabotage, and standardized retail prices. Defense attorneys argued that the arrangements were collective bargaining protected by labor law. The trial judge dismissed the case for lack of evidence of intent to monopolize, but the Department of Justice secured a consent decree in 1940. The decree ordered the union and distributors to cease route allocation practices and price fixing, and to allow independent dealers to resume operations. It was the first federal acknowledgement that Chicago's milk system had functioned as an economic cartel. Yet by the time the decree took effect, consolidation was complete. Independents lacked capital to restart, and the large distributors retained their fleets, licenses, and contracts. Behind the legal proceedings, investigators continued tracing the money itself. Treasury memoranda from 1939 and 1940 show that cash deposits linked to the dairy and ice trades fell sharply after public hearings began. Analysts inferred that the outfit had diverted its collections to less visible fronts: laundry, waste removal, and vending machine distribution. The milk trucks no longer served as primary cash couriers, but the methods perfected through them, frequent small pickups, legitimate invoices, and blending of legal with illegal income, remained central to syndicate accounting. Historians regard this adaptation as the birth of structured laundering in American organized crime. It replaced concealment with normalization. Where the bootlegger had hidden bottles in false compartments, the accountant now hid dollars in daily receipts. The 1940 consent decree formally ended the milk wars, but its effects reached beyond dairies. Congress and federal agencies used the case as evidence that criminal infiltration of labor and logistics required statutory change. The episode informed the drafting of later legislation. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 restricted secondary boycotts and empowered courts to investigate unions engaged in racketeering, while the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act of 1959 mandated financial transparency. Both traced their conceptual roots to the failures of enforcement during the 1930s milk investigation. Economically, Chicago's dairy market stabilized under a few corporate brands. Meadowmoor remained active under new management into the early 1940s, before being absorbed by Bowman Dairy Company. Ralph Capone, whose investments had initiated the takeover, served a prison sentence for tax evasion, but resumed minor business activities upon release in 1944. The outfit, under Tony Accardo and later Sam Giancana, maintained a diversified portfolio of legal enterprises modeled on the dairy precedent: trucking, garbage collection, construction, and vending. Each operated with union cooperation and high cash turnover. The milk truck system had demonstrated the principle: control the route, control the revenue regardless of the product. For law enforcement agencies, the case forced a strategic shift. After 1940, the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the newly formed Federal Bureau of Investigation began tracking financial flows rather than shipments. Auditors examined deposit patterns, currency denominations, and transport schedules. This analytical approach would later underpin tax prosecutions against gang figures nationwide. The first field manuals on financial investigation, issued in 1941, cited Chicago's dairy routes as a key example of concealed income through legitimate distribution. In retrospect, the transformation of milk trucks into cash carts was less a single conspiracy than an economic adaptation. When Prohibition ended, the infrastructure that had moved beer and spirits, drivers, warehouses, cash couriers, could not simply vanish. The dairy industry offered a perfect replacement: essential, perishable, and cash-based. Each delivery truck already collected money from dozens of households and stores, making additional envelopes indistinguishable. Health inspectors checked for contamination, not currency. The system required no secrecy, only routine. Through repetition, The criminal economy merged with the ordinary one until distinction blurred completely. By the outbreak of the Second World War, Chicago's milk distribution had become just another regulated business, yet its history lingered in government files. The Treasury's final summary on the matter, dated December 1941, concluded that organized crime revenues formerly associated with illicit liquor have been absorbed into legitimate commercial channels, notably local delivery industries. The report estimated that the outfit's earnings from all distribution, fronts including dairy, between 1933 and 1940 totaled roughly $40 million in unreported income. No further prosecutions followed. War production shifted priorities, and the milk routes of Chicago were left to operate in peace. Historians now view the episode as an inflection point in American organized crime history. It demonstrated that illicit finance could survive Prohibition repeal by embedding itself inside the logistics of daily life. Later rackets, from garbage hauling in New York to waste management in Las Vegas, repeated the Chicago model. The pattern originated not in speakeasies or casinos, but in something as mundane as a morning milk delivery. Every bottle left on a doorstep symbolized the new economy of crime, regular, regulated, and profitable. Within a decade, the memory of the milk wars faded from newspapers. The consent decree firms prospered during wartime rationing, supplying military contracts and school lunch programs. Consumers remembered only that deliveries had once been interrupted, not that those interruptions had masked the transfer of millions in cash. The trucks remained repainted and modernized, but the system they had sustained quietly continued in other industries. The transformation was complete. What began as a stopgap measure to launder bootlegging profits evolved into a permanent blueprint for organized business under the law's radar. By 1945, federal economists studying urban crime wrote in their annual report, "The Chicago dairy consolidation of 1933-1940 marked the transition of organized crime from vice supply to service monopoly." In that assessment lay the story's essence. The milk trucks of Depression-era Chicago had indeed become cash carts, not through cinematic heists or hidden compartments, but through paperwork, price control, and the relentless logic of distribution. The trucks delivered both nourishment and money, and their routes charted the path by which the underworld entered legitimate commerce.